Welcome to the next video in the Learn How to Paper Piece Masterclass, and today we're going to talk about English paper piecing. And this is another method that kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap. And, I have to be honest that when I first heard about English paper piecing, I was like, I don't understand it. I don't understand why anybody would want to English paper piece when we have sewing machines and those are great. And then I started realizing, oh, you know what? This could actually be really beneficial when we're traveling, because I get really bored really quickly when we're traveling. And I do really like road trips because it gives me a chance to think, but I want to do something and I get car sick. So anyway, enough about that. I realized, oh, this could be actually really beneficial. And then my kids were little and I wanted to sew. I was in the middle of a quilt along, and I only had the foundation paper piece patterns, and I wanted to sew and my kids wanted to play outside, and I had a light bulb. Oh my goodness, I could take them to the park, we could play in the yard, and I can sew, I can get what I want, and they can get what they want. So that was where my love of English paper piecing began. I still thought it was for the birds, but I prepped some little hexagons for a trip, and I sewed all of them before we left on our trip, and I had to, make some more before we left. And so that's where I was really, really hooked, that the understanding the portability. So if you are watching this and you think, oh my gosh, English paper piecing is for the birds, I would rather do just about anything else, you are in good company, because I was the same. Okay, so let's talk about this printout. Just like foundation paper piecing, you're going to be sewing on the line, but instead of using the machine, you're going to use, you're going to sew by hand. I feel like the contrast is too close here. There's not enough contrast. So I'm going to change this fabric here for sewing this. But it doesn't matter. The method is still the same. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut along the outside. And you don't have to be super careful about cutting along the outside. Let's just get rid of all this excess paper. Okay, so my method, like foundation paper piecing, is just a little bit different, and it's just so that there is an extra layer of accuracy, because I feel like the purpose of foundation or English paper piecing is the accuracy. I have just a few differences from what other quilters might do, and I will walk you through them and I will explain why I do what I do. Okay, so this is just like what we had talked about before. This is going to be the sky. This is going to be the foreground. This is going to be piece 10. So here's the change. This is going to be piece 6 and 8. And then I like this one a lot, piece 7. Let's double check. Okay, definitely have enough of that. So I don't worry about so much the outside. Sometimes I cut extra along the outside. This part is a little bit tricky when you're folding your piece, and I'll show you how I kind of deal with that. And I know, this is the outside piece, and I will show you why in just a minute. But basically I just keep my pieces off to the side. I set it with the color that it needs to be with. So then it just kind of helps me remember what I need to do. Okay, so we're going to just cut out the ones that are the, maybe not the easiest, but the most notable. I think that's usually where I start, with what is the most, going to be the most notable as I work through gluing and putting the block together. So obviously the bottom is going to be the easiest. Let's just slide those up to the top. So where I differ from other English paper piecers who have quite strong opinions, and that's fine because I have quite strong opinions about a lot of things, is many of them do not put glue on the back side of the template. Oh, and the other thing is that I use regular copy paper. Just like foundation paper piecing, I just use regular copy paper because it's so cheap, and I typically would forget to replace. Oh goodness, where I thought the front was is not the front. I guess it doesn't really matter. We'll keep going with it. Anyway, so if I don't use copy paper, I'm not going to remember to change the paper in my printer. So what I just did was I put just a little bit of glue. I like cheap, clear glue stick. I stock up on these every few years. I talked about these at length. I use them for foundation and for English paper piecing. So this is called glue basting. And when you put down your template, put a little bit of glue on the back and stick it to your fabric. Make sure that you're leaving a very generous, this is probably almost a 1/2 inch, probably 3/8, a good amount around all 4 sides. I like using a generous 1/4 inch to probably 3/8 of an inch. So that's all we're going to do. Okay, so nothing fancy. Actually, I'm going to cut this off because I probably would stitch it in, and then that would be not really funny. I'd probably be irritated about that. So another place that I differ from other English paper piecers is I have found that I really like putting the glue, and I like using a healthy amount of glue, not so much that it's clumping, but I do want to make sure that it sticks. And it could be because I live in Colorado and it is pretty dry here. So put the glue on the edge and of the fabric. I don't like putting it on the paper. I have tried that and I did like that, but I have actually since found that I much prefer putting it on the fabric. And we'll talk about that with piece 7 as to why, but this just makes it so much easier. Okay, so my glue, I think this glue stick has been left out for a little bit. Left open. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit more glue over here since I've been talking. And I'm going to push this over, and then I'm going to tell you about the seam allowance. Not the seam allowance, the glue allowance, I guess you could say. The amount of glue, and I'll talk about it on this side. You want to make sure, so I put the glue here on the back side. You want to make sure that there is going to be room between the glue and the edge of the template. Okay, so, and that's where your needle is going to go through. So here is another place that I differ from other English paper piecers, and I am not going, because this has 3 outside corners, I am not going to glue baste all of the sides. And the reason is I have decided that I am going to machine sew all of my blocks together. I'm not going to English paper piece all of the blocks together. I have customers who do, and I think that is fantastic. It's just not for me because I want to do as many as I can, and I don't want to be sewing them by hand. So because I have chosen to machine piece all of my blocks together, because that will be a more efficient use of my time, I make sure that I have a generous seam allowance, because sometimes the pieces are going to shift around, and sometimes the block is going to get to be a little bit bigger. Generous seam allowance so then I can trim it up, and then I will just sew around the block. Okay, makes sense. So this piece is done. I'm going to set this over to the side. It's off. I'll put it over here so that you can see it. Okay, so then the next piece, or next section that is going to be easiest, and try to cut on the line as much as you can. I didn't here. Where it does get to be a bit of an issue is on really tiny pieces, and one that I'm thinking of in particular is my mountain goat pattern. There are notes in that one about how to deal with it, but just, you know, like with foundation paper piecing, the more accurate, the better. So you'll notice that there is an arrow in all of my patterns, and that is to show you which way is up. For directional piece, that really definitely, you know, makes a huge difference. For this one, it's not going to make a difference. For putting the block together, it will, but we will get there. Okay, so I'm just going to look and see where these are going to be best placed. I think this is pretty good. So I just lay them out. Oops, I got a little bit too low. I like to just lay them out first before I start cutting, and maybe I might even I might do that, because that is actually going to maximize this space a little bit more. Again, generous 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. The purpose of the glue on the back is just to hold it in place so that I can, you know, lay the other pieces down and get them situated where I want to. That should give me about the right amount. And you'll see that I get pretty close to the selvage, and that's okay, because this is going to be in the seam allowance. It, you know, it doesn't really matter what it looks like, you know, when the block is laying flat. I don't like to go over where the holes are. Okay, and then this isn't totally necessary to make sure that you're following the same, you know, angle. I just like to clean it up so there's not a lot of extra in the back. Okay, so then what I do is I lay the pieces out to know where they're going to be. Now, like with foundation paper piecing, we're working with the back. What we see here is the back of the block. And that can be a little bit frustrating, a little bit confusing, and there is a little square on your English paper piece pattern. It's not on mine because I haven't put it there yet, but on yours it will be there. And that serves two purposes. The first is that it's 1 inch. So a 4.5 inch block, 4.5 inch finished, will be 1 inch. So when you print out your printer, make sure it's set on 100%, just like the foundation paper piece. You will measure that little square and make sure that it's 1 inch by 1 inch for the 4.5 inch blocks. So then the next thing is lay out your piece or your template pieces in the way. Oh, what I forgot to say is this is on the back, and the little square shows the front. I know that is really confusing, but it is the industry standard to show you what is the front going to look like. Just like with foundation paper piecing, that layout picture shows you the front, and these pieces are the back. So that does get a little bit tricky sometimes when you're laying things out, but just think whatever's on the right is really supposed to be on the left. So you can see that this is on the right, and I have this one done in English paper piecing, and you see that the tree is on the left. Okay, so the next thing that I do is I lay out my block, not the whole block, but just the section that I'm working on, so that I know, oh, this one is going to be the outside, so I need to glue it here, and I'm going to leave these open. All right, so I'm going to start on this piece because it's a little bit easier to see. So this is going to be the outside, so I'm not going to put any glue on those ones, and you know, sometimes I still do, but it's best practice to not. Okay, so then what I do is I choose either the edge that has as close to a 90-degree angle or is the shortest. And this has the closest to a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to push that over, and you saw that I left a little bit of space. I'm not getting really close over here because I'm going to hold it with my non-dominant hand, you know, about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to create a miter. What this is going to do, and this differs from a lot of people who English paper piece. This one I've gotten really close because it's less than a 90-degree, or I guess technically it's greater than a 90-degree angle. But it's not as hard of a line. That's what I'm trying to communicate there. This differs from hexagons or squares or anything like that, because this here, this corner here, when we miter the corners, allows for the fabric to lay flatter because there's not bulk, and then there's more precision on the front, which means that you will be a much happier camper because the pieces will come together much, much easier than if you go all the way. Let me show you on this one. It's pretty easy to remove. So I'm going to go all the way from one edge to the other. So we're going to go all the way over here and then all the way over here. And what you can see is that we have twice the amount of fabric here that we have to go through. It might look nice and tight here, but what's actually happening is this fabric is going this way. And what I noticed really quickly with my patterns, because I had used this method, remember I started with hexagons on that one particular trip, and you know, all the videos I had watched at the time showed pressing the fabric all the way over to the edge, and it's fine if you have a really large hexagon because the fabric will kind of shift. But when you're working with something a lot smaller and wanting something that is more precise, there are a lot of, you know, you get to have a lot of issues. And then if you're dealing with something like this, where it's a very acute angle, it's nearly impossible to not have a lot of extra bulk. And so I learned pretty quickly that my precision was way, way, way off. It was frustrating. So this mitered corner technique for the blocks is really, really helpful. I hope you love it and you give it a try. Okay, so then for the last one. Similar situation. Nothing new. Okie dokie. So let's tape these together. And I'm going to show you the flat back stitch. I've started using the flat back stitch more than whipped stitch. And if you go into any English paper piecing group, people will argue until the cows come home about flat back versus whip stitch and which is better. And I have done both. And I was a huge fan of whip stitch for many years. And then what I discovered is that the stitches would come apart. They wouldn't come apart. That's the wrong word. They would pull. So then that was a place of weakness. So I stopped using the whip stitch. And I only exclusively use the flat back stitch, which does take extra time. However, the block doesn't stretch. So I feel like there's just more integrity with the block. I noticed, let's see, it was on a pillow that I made. It was the Great Smoky Mountains, a panorama pillow. And the stuffing was coming through on the back side. So that was kind of my, oh, maybe I need to change what I'm doing if I don't want the stuffing to come through. But then that's also true for batting. So anyway, so I have my favorite sulky thread. Love this. So I have found, and you cannot see this because I don't have the camera up high enough, so you'll have to trust me, that I use about, let's see, I will measure this. So this is about 16 inches. So I think about 16 to 18 inches. I think 18 is a little bit on the long side for the length that I like to use. I have tried longer, and I really don't care for using longer. And this needle is a little bit bent, so it's a little bit harder to thread. Okay, and the John James Colonial needles that I love. I really like these. It's a Milner needle. The Milner needles are longer than the Quilter needles. The Quilter needles are really short, but they have a longer eye. This is called a quilter's knot. Sue Daly calls it a knicker knot, but it's called a quilter's knot. Okay, so if you are right-handed, you'll do this opposite. I am a lefty, so I hold the needle in my dominant hand and I hold the thread in my non-dominant hand. And I hold it just a little bit, so there's just a tiny bit of a tail sticking out between my thumb and my forefinger, okay? So nothing fancy, that's it. I'm just holding the thread, non-dominant hand, between my thumb and my forefinger. So all I did was I just, hold it like this, and I grab it like this. I want the thread to be coming like this. Then I put the needle here, and it's not super deep down in my finger and thumb. Just kind of, resting and come out pretty easily. I have pressure farther down, but again, it's not a really, I'm not holding it really tight. I'm just pressing my finger and thumb together. And then I put the needle so it's facing upright. And I'm going to switch my thumb and my forefinger. So now I'm pinching it so that the needle is not going to move. Okay, so I'm not pinching it hard. It's just, good pressure. Now, again, because this is my dominant hand I want the tail of the thread pointing toward my body. I want the point of the needle facing up. I want the tail of the thread is over here, and it comes around and it creates a loop. All right, do you follow that so far? I hope so. Now we're going to wrap from top to bottom and around in that counterclockwise position. And I'm going to probably wrap, what is that? 5, 6 times? And pull it down. And now I don't want the knot to be so tight that I can't get the needle through, and I don't want it to be so loose that it doesn't really create a knot. Okay, so then we slide that down. You just pull it down just a little bit. Sometimes you have to, scooch up your thumb a little bit. Okay, so we're here. What do I do? Oh goodness. It's been a while since I've told how to do this. Oh yes, okay. I forgot where I was. Okay, so then we have, wrapped it around 6 or 7 times. Then we have the loop coming around. I like to use my last 2 fingers, ring finger and pinky finger. And it's double threaded here and single threaded here. And wrap this around. Okay, pinch that down. Push the needle through. I've done this a little bit too tight. Okay, so my thumb and finger are still on top of that knot. Okay, it's pinched under my fingernail. You can't see it. And I'm just going to pull, 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 pull. And I can feel the knot. It created the knot. Okay? So it will take some practice, but you can do it. It's a very, very, very secure knot. It's fantastic. And it lays pretty flat. Okay, so we're going to go on the top of the template underneath. So we have the fabric here, the template, and then, the next piece of fabric, it's all sandwiched together. We're going to go in through the miter, and we're going to catch a few pieces of thread. Okay? So this is another place that I differ from other people in how they teach English paper piecing. And a lot of people will say, oh, you only need to catch, just 2 or 3 threads. And I disagree with that, because if you're wanting to use your quilt, you want to have enough that is going to have a good structure to it. It's going to hold up well. But you don't want to have so much that it's going to bunch. So if you can see here that I probably go in very little. I don't even know. Just like maybe a millimeter or 2. Very, very little, like a little bit of a hair. And you don't have to be, super, super exact about it. But enough. Let's see. I would do like that much. So enough that you're going to grab it, but not so much that it's going to bunch. Okay, and then you pull it. And I pull with intention, but not so much force that it's going to break the thread. I don't have an issue so much with the sulky thread breaking. I have had that happen with other threads. That's why I recommend this one. I just don't have issues that I have with other threads. So the other thing that I have changed in the last few years, since switching from switching from a whip stitch to the flat back stitch, wish I had my readers, because I usually I'm sewing way up here, but there's a camera in my way, and that makes it a little bit difficult. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I make my stitches a lot bit closer together. I used to have stitches farther apart. I probably would be here previously, maybe here. So probably I've shortened them a lot. And it does take extra time. I will admit to that. That's, not so fun, but I would rather have a piece that has a lot of structure. I also don't worry about where the direction of my stitch is. It's not cross stitch, so it doesn't really matter. I am more focused on making sure that my stitches stay on the top of the template and they don't go through to the bottom side. It happens. I mean, you can see my stitches. I'm not really hyper focused. I don't use this because I don't like to see my stitches. A lot of people do use this method because they don't want to see their stitches. That doesn't bother me at all. I use this because it provides more structure and stability. And I'm very utilitarian that way. That's, at the end of the day, that's what I'm after. So I turn the block around when it gets to be too difficult for me to sew in one direction. I like being able to hold on to the block. And if it is just a pain, then I just switch direction and let's see here. Actually, I did not really switch directions. That's kind of interesting. Typically, I do. But that's interesting that I did not switch directions on the back. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If you want to keep going in one direction, then that's great. But if you feel, gosh, this is really cumbersome, I really don't like this. Let me see if I have another block in here and I can show you what the back looks like, because typically I do switch directions. And I think probably here. So you can see I went in one direction here and then I turned it around and I went the other direction. So if you don't like the direction that you're going, just turn your block around and that's that. Okay, so we can see, hopefully you can see, let's see if I have something to point out with. So if we drew an imaginary line across the fabric, we would see that we've reached roughly the end. I don't want to sew all the way up because I know that I will need to cut off some of this up here. On foundation paper piecing, you'd sew the whole, from one end to the other. And you could stitch maybe like one stitch farther. I wouldn't, because I have had some blocks that they shift a little bit and it gets, just trust me. I'm not going to go into a whole long diatribe of why I wouldn't go much farther, but basically give yourself all of this room in case you need to square up your block. And if you have a knot, let's say your knot is right up here, then you run the risk of cutting off your knot. Ask me how I know this. So for this piece, we've sewn all the way across, and what I'm going to do when I get to, I do this in two ways. And it might not come up, but it also might on the inside, but I want to tell you about it now, is I like to lock my stitch. So I definitely do it on the outside when I like to sew from the inside of the block to the outside of the block, because then that gives room for the block to stretch out as it needs. So then when it's pressed, it lays flatter. I also feel like who really cares if the outside of my seams are perfect if the inside looks like a hot mess express. So that's why I started with the inside here and I worked my way out. The other time that it's beneficial is when I go to sew this piece here, or something over here. If I have a piece of thread and I'm wanting to switch, I like to make sure that these corners are really nice and tight. So I'll take one additional stitch in the same place that I just was, just to lock that stitch. It just helps keep things together really nice and neat. Okay, so that's kind of my locking stitch. Then I go off to the side. I don't think it really matters if you choose the right side or the left side. And I take one stitch, and then one more. And come on, little piece. Okay, so I haven't pulled it all the way through, and that's because I'm going to do, I don't know what kind of knot this is. No clue. I think it's called a figure 8 knot, but I could be wrong. So again, I'm going to go counterclockwise around the back side of the needle, and I'm going to go twice. I just go twice this time. Sometimes I go 3 times, but typically I only go twice. Okay, so the thread is on the right side of the needle, and I go around the back, 1, 2. What I have noticed if I go 3 is that sometimes the knot does not go, it gets too far away, and then I feel like it becomes compromised. So I want the knot to be as close to the stitch as possible. Oh geez, come on Rachel, 1, 2. All right, so then like before, I put the thread under my non-dominant hand. So then I'm going to take the other side, and I'm going to go from the top around to the back. Okay, so then that pulls that tightish here, but not so super tight, because you still need to be able to get your needle through. Okay, so then move your thumb up. Your thumb is going to be on the top of the needle, holding down that knot. This is like really, really important. Make sure that you're holding down that knot so that the knot doesn't get really far away from where that stitch is, because then what can happen is it'll start loosening and opening. Okay, so I feel the thread underneath of my thumb. Okay, look at that nice knot. Isn't that great? I used to recommend a different kind of knot, and I have found that this is the best. The other knot did have some times that it would come out, and I feel like this one just holds it better. So for the sake of the video, I'm going to skip sewing this on camera because it is exactly the same, and I don't think I'm going to say anything different or beneficial or useful. What I am going to do after I put my needle away, after I follow my own rules, is I am going to glue baste these. I will walk you through this because there are important parts. And then I'm going to sew these together. So I'm going to leave this because you don't need to see any of that.